All right, hang on. What's up, guys? It's Nate, owner at Steel Strength Training. So we're just going to be having this conversation. You guys are going to be watching, or if you're checking it out on the podcast, you'll be listening. But I just got a series of questions for Hayden, so you guys get to meet him. So, Hayden, how did you end up as a trainer at Steel Strength Training?
Man, so before I got into training in general, I just recently graduated last year. I was on a biology pre-med track, so on my way to medical school, chugging ahead with that. But after graduating, I worked at an outpatient clinic, kind of thinking that was a good way to spend my gap year, get ready for the MCAT, all the applications, that whole process. But after being there for about, I'd say 3 or 4 months, I kind of just decided that I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life, 30, 40 years in a clinical setting. But I knew I wanted to work with people. I've always known that, even since being in school. But one thing that I've always loved, even way back in high school, is strength training, working with barbells. And eventually, as I got into college and I started working with people, other students, worked with the powerlifting club, just helping people in that area. So kind of at that same time when I was thinking through.
And really quick, you started the powerlifting club, right?
Yes, yeah. So there was a buddy of mine who had thought about it, and he was just about to graduate when I was a freshman. But then after I had kind of got some interest from other students that I knew, like friends and friends of friends, he was like, "Hey man, you seem like you'd be a great fit for starting this club that I've been thinking about doing." So
and really quick for the listeners, even though this is just a casual conversation, if you were to tell somebody who doesn't know anything about powerlifting, what is, in a couple sentences, what is powerlifting?
So powerlifting revolves around 3 barbell movements: the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. So for people who compete, there are different weight classes, like there are for a lot of sports, wrestling. So you weigh in, that kind of decides where you're going to end up in that bracket, and you have, in any competition setting, you have 3 attempts to get your best number on all of those lifts. And you can compete in any federation. But it's just a way to
just a way to test strength on those movements.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right. Sorry to interrupt. Go back to your story.
So where was I? Powerlifting club. So right around then, even before, like I said, in high school, I knew that I had that was a hobby of mine. And I lived in North Africa before I came here to the States for college, but not a lot of people knew a whole lot about it. So I'd be going to my little garage gym, I knew the owner, and just when I kind of got more interested in strength training in particular, moving away from bodybuilding splits and all that, he was like, "Oh yeah, I see what you're doing." He said, "Oh yeah, I've done a little strength training," but a lot of people, just regular gym goers that I saw all the time, they were asking me "Oh, what are you doing? I've never seen this kind of training." And even then, I was like, "Wow!" Even in a different country, a lot of people just aren't aware of it. So just for them to have that exposure, and that kind of went with me as I went to college and saw that same interest.
It's funny, man. The bodybuilding splits, I feel like for most are a rite of passage. If you, that's for most or a lot of people. It was for me. And certainly at the time I got into lifting, that was the rite of passage. You had your magazines or whatever you could pull off of. 100%. Bodybuilding.com, anything like that. And it's really interesting because this is not something I talk about a lot with the clients, powerlifting per se, but powerlifting is really, and bodybuilding too. We borrow some from multiple strength sports, but powerlifting is probably the number one influence. I said the biggest influence on how we train clients today. While we're not training for a heavy 1 rep max on squat, bench, or deadlift, and the goal is just to get them generally stronger. When I started lifting out, I did bodybuilding splits, and I made some progress. But it was really when I did Jim Wendler's 5-3-1. Which some may argue that's not a pure powerlifting program, but it really emphasized getting stronger on the big lifts, and that did way more for my strength and my physique than any 6 months on that program did more than 3-4 years of body part splits up until that point. And that was where I saw the magic of progressive overload, getting stronger on the barbell movements. And that's really, again, I don't talk about that with clients, and maybe we should, but that is the number one thing that has influenced how we train.
And even if you look at the sport of bodybuilding, a lot of the greats that you see in the sport have that powerlifting background. Like when you think about like Ronnie Coleman, like Lee Priest, all of them have that, you know, base of general strength. And if you ask
super
them,
strong.
Yeah, like when they're going, like they're trying to like, you know, slab on 20 extra pounds of lean body mass, and you ask them like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm doing lots of squats, lots of deadlifts.
Yeah. So so I think, you know, we were talking about CrossFit right before this, and I have to say one thing that CrossFit has done, and I think they do a lot of things well, but one thing that CrossFit has done very well that all the other strength sports, in my opinion, have failed to do is like get a barbell in people's hands. So, I mean, there are people who, you know, get into powerlifting and bodybuilding and other, you know, strongman and things like that. But for the most part, for the everyday population, like there are everyday people who are attracted to CrossFit. That's really not the case for the other strength sports. And so I think one of the things that scares a lot of people off, when you look at bodybuilding and they see these massive physiques, which, you know, may or may not, I mean, there's no doubt they train hard, their nutrition's dialed in. It doesn't happen by accident. There may be some assistance along the way depending on who you're talking about. But you know, you talk about, and this is the world that I came from in a sense. I never competed in powerlifting, but these were the people that I studied under, that I read their stuff, their material. But just the idea of, you know, get as strong as you possibly can. Let's pack on slabs of muscle. And that's what I wanted when I started working out. But now, like, training everyday people, like, I can't tell you the last time or if I've ever heard somebody come in and be like, hey, I want to put on slabs of muscle, right? And so how do you think powerlifting benefits, or not that it has to be like powerlifting in a competitive sense, but just that style of training, how do you feel like that benefits, you know, your everyday person walking in the door?
I think, you know, especially for the kinds of clients that we see here, a lot of them are, you know, grandparents, retiring, and at that point they just want to be able to like pick them up, play with them. You know, so they have different priorities by the time they're in that stage of life. But I mean, even with powerlifting in particular, I mean, you were talking about, you know, for people who are really interested in the sport, their main focus is improving their 1 rep max. Like that's what the training is focused towards. But I would say about 80% of the training itself is what we implement here. And like that extra 20% is like peaking for their competition, getting more specific, getting accustomed to that maximum force production in that 1 rep. But the rest of the training mindset behind it is the same mindset that we use here. And I think, you know, this is probably an oversimplification for people who are really deep in any one of these sports, but I feel like powerlifters, bodybuilders, like really, and people that just want to be lean, strong, and healthy, really are all doing the same thing. Like you're working with in a moderate rep range, focusing on getting as strong as possible. It's just, you know, you take out the prep work. So you're taking out the dieting for the bodybuilder. You're not doing this insane diet to, you know, lose all your body fat basically to get on stage. We're not having our clients do those last, whatever, 4, 8, however many weeks you would take to prep for a meet, where you take those moderate rep ranges and dial them, you know, work up heavier and heavier in the loads and move towards that 1 rep max, getting ready for that competition. And even with CrossFit, and it's a little bit of a different animal, but I feel like still being strong and like building strength and muscle is literally great for pretty much everybody across the board, at all times, all age, gender, doesn't matter. And I think even CrossFit, I feel like if, you know, those athletes, there's a big skill component there because they're doing a lot of different movements, but still they need that base level of muscle and strength. And so basically what I've tried to do here, and you've picked up on that, is like strip away all the extra stuff or the specific stuff that's like specific to other sports, and just really help people get generally fit and strong and muscular and lean, and help them lose body fat if that's a goal as well, but just help them be lean, strong, and healthy. And I always say, like, if you do that, first of all, you can just keep training like that for life. And even once you build a decent level there, you can maintain that with relatively little work the rest of your life, which is pretty cool. But then you also, when you have that base level of strength and muscle mass, you can then go, maybe you do want to get into CrossFit, maybe you do want to get into bodybuilding, powerlifting, maybe you want to go run 5Ks, maybe whatever. You know, it just sets you up for whether it's playing with the grandkids or, hey, I want to, you know, squat as much as I possibly can. That base level of strength literally is beneficial for everything. Yeah, and you know, you kind of touched on something there. Even for people who are involved in those like more specific strength sports, what you'll find, even for like very elite level athletes in those fields, is that if they get too hyper specific in their training, it almost becomes a detriment, because strength training, both for just the everyday person and for the higher level athlete, if you don't keep the general parameters of how your training goes, a more like simple, boiled down, because although there might be those extras that you were just saying before, if you don't stick to the basics and like go back to like, what am I trying to accomplish here? Because the whole point of strength training is that you're exposing yourself to, you know, a stimulus that you wouldn't otherwise get if you were just like out and about, you know, working, playing with the grandkids. Like there's a unique benefit that you get from doing the movements that we teach. So if you lose sight of that and you get too focused on, oh, I want to be good at doing this, so I'm going to do movements that are focused on this. You know, there's an element of truth to that, like if you're trying to prepare for competition, but you know, keeping it simple is, you know, good for basically everybody.
And piggybacking off of that, like going big, you know, focusing on big picture. Some of the mistakes I made early on, first of all, I spent way too much time on body part splits, bodybuilding splits in the beginning. The second thing is, started doing 5-3-1, started focusing on progressive overload, saw a lot of progress, but then I started doing too much. Like, I was basically like, this was my, you know, 18 to 20-year-old ego getting in the way, where I was just like, oh, I'm basically doing 1 rep maxes almost every time I go to the gym. So I'm just testing my strength. I'm not really building it. And so I got really good at the 1 rep max, at maxing out, but like everything else actually started to deteriorate and move backwards. And then there's kind of a joke in the powerlifting circles. And I would say this is probably the opposite, if anything, of what you'd see like in CrossFit, where, you know, people joke about like, oh, powerlifters need like 10 minutes between sets because they're in terrible shape. And I really let my conditioning slide too. And my thing with conditioning, I think you need to be in good enough shape to do the things you want to do. So like if you want to be a marathon runner, there's a lot of conditioning you got to do. If you just want to play with your kids, your grandkids, your kids, maybe all you need to do is lift and walk. You know, there's a spectrum there depending on what you want to do, what your health goals, what your fitness goals are. But I do think you need to have a base level of conditioning, and I really let that slide, which then impacted my ability to recover, and that impacted my training as well. So I think just taking a big picture focus on, you know, if you're training for something specific, okay, but pretty much nobody that we're working with is. So you really want to make sure they're getting stronger. You know, I think you can focus on building strength, building muscle, improving their conditioning all at the same time. And I think like you just want to keep keep all of those things developing up and up and up and up. And then for a brief period of time, if you want to focus on something, you know, you can get more specific on that. So, and I would say, and now I'm kind of ranting here, but I think with CrossFit, one of the things that I see is oftentimes the workouts are very like, those people are in great aerobic shape. But one of the things that, I mean, there's no doubt, like people that do CrossFit work super hard. I think one of the things though that, and this depends on which, I guess box, right? Which box you're at. Yes. So which gym you're at, because I think the programming varies a lot, just like it does with any other gym. But I think placing a bigger emphasis on building a base level of strength and muscle mass, and then building skill work and conditioning work around that. Like, and I think a lot of CrossFit gyms do that, but I think that's going to set you up for long-term success even in CrossFit. But again, I think all of it boils down, I'm acting like I know how to compete in CrossFit, I don't. But I think everything boils down to like, you can't go wrong by continuing to improve your strength, your muscle mass, and your conditioning. And then I would say, you know, losing excess body fat, whatever that is for your life and what you need to do in your health. So.
Yeah, and you know, like I was saying earlier, you know, you're talking about like CrossFit athletes in particular, like just the aerobic strength. The ability to, you know, maintain that level of performance throughout the whole competition day. You know, just like all the, you know, the crazy things that they're doing. Like the kind of prep that they do to get to that place doesn't look like a repeated competition day.
That's right.
4 or 5 months out.
That's right.
You know, they have that same like systematic mindset of, I need to focus on strength.
Yes.
Like if it's like, you know, getting my squat up, or if they have like, you know, an idea of what that competition setting is going to look like, trying to duplicate that setting every single day when you come to the gym leading up to that competition is ultimately you're going to run across the same problem you were talking about. Is like you get too focused on one rep max,
Yeah,
and that's that's the goal.
Yep.
Then you'll find that, especially like in a powerlifting meet, you talk about like stereotypes. Is that you'll work up to your third attempt, and you'll talk to someone after they just finish, like, oh, how you feeling? It's like, oh, man, I'm gassed.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you lifted for like 5 minutes.
Right.
Now, like, you gotta wait for 3 or 4 hours until your flight comes around. But a lot of that's like, well, how much conditioning work did you do?
That's right.
Like, how's your work capacity?
That's
It's
right.
like, well, I just did 5s, 3s, and 1s, and that's
Yeah,
it. Like nothing else. It's like, well, no wonder you're gassed all the time.
Yeah. That's something, and maybe we should hop back on and talk about this in another episode. But I've been adding like zone 2 cardio to my weeks, and I'm honestly only doing like 60 to 75 minutes total per week. But it's crazy how much of an impact it's made just on my daily energy levels, my sleep, my stress, and also just ability to recover between workouts and even between sets in my workout. Like it's absolutely crazy. And I think for me, conditioning is something I've really let slide over the years, and so there's a lot of benefits focusing on that. But anyway, we can talk about maybe conditioning for another day. Let's leave with this for this one with this question. What is it that drew you to steel? Like, you're obviously interested in lifting, you got a powerlifting background, but what is it that interested you, and specifically in coming to steel and working like with our community?
Yeah, I think especially in Birmingham, I mean, you talk about CrossFit presence, like it's very prominent in the city. So just like looking around, like, and by that time I decided I wanted to transition to something more like involved in like sports performance, just in like this area of like training people with strength training in particular. As I was looking around, like there was lots of CrossFit boxes. Just that style of training, like you said, it just appeals to people because there's a group atmosphere, like we're all in this together, and I think that's what they do really well. And then there's some other like more specific gyms that if people already have that hobby, or like, oh, I like powerlifting, I like Olympic weightlifting, they have those places for those people. But just like for the everyday person who doesn't know what they're doing, and they just need someone to walk through it, I really haven't seen that anywhere. So I remember when I came across Steel and I just saw like what the mission of Steel was, and like helping people who don't have that previous experience. Like helping them introduce something that they, like you said, they can do for the rest of their life.
That's right.
And like, for people who are involved in CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, they have their time where their career is, in that sport reaches its peak, and then there are slumps along the ways, but then at a certain point, it's like, I can't really maintain this level of competitiveness. But, coming here and seeing just the more intentional focus on the clients, whether you're working one-on-one, really personal, or just working in group settings where you have like 6-8 people. But it's still very personalized, and there's a lot of just like slower instruction based, making sure that all their questions are answered, and that they feel assured as they're being introduced to something totally new. And then as they get better, that they feel confident that you're walking through it with them. So that's something that is very hard to find, and I honestly can say haven't seen anywhere else.
Cool, man. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I like to think we're unique here at Steel, but I haven't come across anything like it either. And so it's hard. And I'm in these online communities where I talk with other gym owners, and like sometimes it's hard to explain what we do because it is different. So it's made explaining it to people difficult. It's made marketing it somewhat challenging, but I think we've really found our messaging, and like you said. And so again, even I love that you said that in your own words, but just like helping people who are new to this. So glad you're here, man.
Yeah, man. Good talking.
All right, we'll do this again soon.